If there's anybody who can say he has not observed or noticed the impact of climate change, that would definitely be a lie as far as I'm concerned.
I think the rhetoric of us, thinking for the people should change. We should give an environment where people can talk about their needs, can talk about their priorities, can talk about their locally led solutions.
Each one of us has a responsibility towards the change that we want. Either be a voice, speak up, change your lifestyle, change your way of living, don't be part of the pollution, don't be part of the emissions. So generally, yeah, that's it.
South Sudan, out of 72 states, 72, yes, 43 all affected. And currently, before I came, there was a report that more than 1.5 million people displaced. Wow. However, we just had another report this morning that people affected are now more than 3 million. They are displaced. So many people are displaced completely from their ancestral land.
Will every penny of that money get to the ground and do exactly what it has to do? Or some of it stays in the political settings, and then some of it comes to the ground but end up not doing what it's supposed to do. So
but our disappointments so far, our development partners have not responded to our request of a figure, because without a figure, the rest really is important, but we need a figure as a headline to really determine whether we are making progress. And then people outside this room are expecting us to come up with that.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. My name is Farah Osman. I'm from Somalia. We work with the internally displaced people, vulnerable host communities, humanitarian, climate change, climate disaster-induced migration, and cross-border, looking at programs that support communities across the border, both in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya. We also work with the government to have policies that protect children and policies that contribute to durable solutions in terms of the climate change effects and the disaster management.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
It's really great. In Somalia, would you say that the majority of people are using firewood and charcoal for cooking, or are they using gas?
Okay, no. And first of all, the majority of the people are using charcoal, and that has resulted deforestation, which impact is now felt across the country.
What percentage of people in Somalia would you say are using charcoal for cooking these days?
I would say over 75%. Although there is now the government and the international community have now come up with a plan of banning the charcoal export. The drought is because the trees attract rain, so they are no longer there. Now that charcoal has been banned, what is the alternative source of income for these people that have been practicing this, which is not there? Yeah. And I think for us to have sustainable afforestation programs, it's important that the same people who have been banning the charcoal are now used positively to also plant trees.
So have you seen a big shift in the climate and the environment since you were young?
The pastoral communities are suffering. For one, there is always conflicts over the minimal resources in terms of the pasture, in terms of water that are in the country. Last week alone, there was rain, and a slight rain in one of the central areas called Galmudug, where the pastoralists fought over the resources, because others migrated to the place where it rained, and those ones living there said, no, this is ours. 11 people died in one day, and over 15 wounded. This is over water, number one. Number two, the migration is also increasing, that people are moving from Somalia to Kenya, mid areas of Kenya like Cielo, where they're looking for pasture and water. And then the country also experiences two shocks. One, in every year, you either have floods or drought. Somalia now is almost a desert country. I remember there used to be green reserves that are guided by the government. Those things are no longer there. And then there is also the people who have been having animals. Because of the climate change, they lost their own livestock. They don't have any other alternative source to start livelihood. So now they have to resort to finding alternative source of livelihood, which is cutting trees, burning it. Now that the jackal has been banned, they are banning it to use it for local consumption. The global climate change affects the country in terms of Somalia. Because of the climate change, there's no local production. And those people who used to do the farming, the subsistence farming, are no longer farming for two reasons. But because if they farm, there's nowhere to get rain. Because most of the farms are rain-fed, which are no longer there, number one. So they gave up farming. They came into IDPs, internally displaced people, and that is now putting a lot of pressure in the urban settings. And then they also are suffering because they don't have land. There's the issue of land, evictions. I remember before I left Mogadishu on 8th of August, and an IDP camp that was hosting over 700 families, IDPs, were evicted by the government because that was a national land. So I think the government should also come up with the policies of finding a durable solution for these people and looking at now how do we create alternative economic opportunities, looking at how do we come up with renewable energy, green jobs, and technical vocational training skills. That would have created skills, life skills programs that will be able to engage these people.
Do you feel like funding is being used responsibly in Somalia?
I would say yes, and I would say no. I would say yes because the humanitarian organizations are providing funds to the people, particularly looking at multi-purpose cash transfer that have been a dignified way of supporting people who have been affected by the shocks. That has been a relief for them. But is that sustainable? Because you have like a 3-month multi-purpose cash transfer, it is enabling them to put something on their fire, to have a feeding for 3 months. But after the 90 days, what happens? Because there's no alternative. That's one. Number two, I think there's also lots of bureaucracies when it comes to, particularly for the local civil society organization accessing fund for locally led projects. One, applying for fund requires lots of process. They have to submit a very complex proposals. Yet this is not their language. The proposal are supposed to be in English. They cannot write in English. They don't have the expertise to meet all the due diligence processes, the compliance issues. They are not there. So how will they be able to access fund? And then now they are told that you cannot access fund because you're not eligible. You're not eligible. So I think there's need to change the narrative. How do we make it flexible? How do we make it accessible? How do we be able to reach the people that have been affected? So I think if we have that, then we'll be able to have meaningful interventions, and then they have to be also locally led.
The applications were in your mother tongue.
Exactly.
Would that help?
Yeah, sure. So if they are in mother tongue, and then the due diligence process in terms of the compliance issues are now more flexible, I think that will be able to two things. One, in terms of the capacitating civil society organizations, and two, they will be able to also contribute to local organizations accessing locally funds. And then we would have seen more community groups coming up with community-led projects that will be able to respond to their needs. So I think that participatory approach of the community would have contributed to ownership, would have contributed to their participation, and would have contributed to the sustainability. And this has to be also a need-based approach, rather than country level, support that we are giving this to Somalia. I think that will be able to, be a lot of bureaucratic, and that will not be able to have timely response.
Sorry, which percent of the funding would you say actually gets to the people?
I would say 75% of the funds should reach the community. Supporting, let's say, water reservoirs, earth dams, looking at farming, looking at solar energy, looking at and water harvesting, and
But I'm saying realistically, do you feel
realistically,
like
I think 75%,
the people?
75. Now it doesn't reach. I give you an example. Now we have international organizations that are operating there. They are HQ, like New York and all those things, has to get a percentage of the administrative cost. The regional office in either Nairobi or where has to get a percentage of the administrative cost. The country has to get a percentage of the administrative cost. That may add up to, let's say, 50% of the fund. Then, will 50% make a difference in the community? My organization supported a government-led conference on climate-induced climate resilience conference on the 6th and 7th of November. That was also co-hosted by one of the universities called Mogadishu University. So lots of research on looking at climate-induced migration, durable solutions were presented. They were all talking about anticipatory action. They were all talking about that let's not be reactive, let's be proactive, which tells you the call to action that prevention is better than cure. Yeah.
Very good. So, as we're talking about solutions, that's my final question. What do you think are some practical solutions for Somalia?
I think the rhetoric of us, thinking for the people should change. We should give an environment where people can talk about their needs, can talk about their priorities, can talk about their locally led solutions. I think for now we have been feeding people. We have been thinking about feeding them. I think that needs to change. That we should teach them skills to feed for themselves, engaging them in productive activities that they can own, that they can lead, and that they are familiar with. In that case, then we are contributing to durable solutions. But if we are giving them handouts, they will depend on us. So that dependency syndrome has to change.
So would you recommend instead of handouts, maybe microloans, low interest?
I would recommend the seed grants, revolving funds, group saving and loans for women, and green jobs. Looking at also SMEs, supporting micro enterprises, the small and medium enterprises, particularly for women and youth, and then tapping also into the youth energy. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's really great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate.
Thank you, Jeremy.
So
I really
much.
appreciate
it's
it.
really great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Claire Nasanga from Uganda, part of the Rise Up movement, and currently I'm the COP29 lead, enabling various activists around Africa to attend such climate-related events.
Hello everyone, my name is Ahumza Kurungarina, part of Rise Up movement Uganda, and a sustainable fashion designer and advocate.
So I have some questions about back home in Uganda. Which type of cooking fuel do you use for normal cooking? Do you use firewood, charcoal, gas?
We use gas, charcoal, and firewood, but like most people use firewood, and charcoal. Yeah.
Which percentage would you say in Uganda roughly are using firewood and charcoal?
Would be like 70%.
70%.
Yeah.
And is it cheaper than cooking gas?
Yeah, it's cheaper.
It's cheaper.
Yeah, it's way cheaper.
Oh, okay.
And for the use of charcoal, firewood or gas, it's also a bit determined by the financial levels of the different groups. And us being among the developing nations, most of the people actually can't afford the charcoal or the gas. We also have like a large forest back there at home, Mavera forest. Outside, when you're outside of it, like you can see, it's really thick, really full. But when you enter inside the heart of the forest, it's actually a lot of deforestation has happened. It's actually getting empty. So the trees are coming from the country.
What are some of the climate effects you're seeing in Uganda? What's happening there on the ground level?
In Uganda we have faced floods recent, like
Floods?
HTZ,
Okay.
because of the heavy rain, and also like it was really hot in the month of July, so hot, and it was really uncomfortable, and that was because of the climate change. So we faced that because I had never experienced that. It was my first time to see that in my country. The issue
So
of
is
flood,
it record level heat?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we had it was a really hot period. We are having floods. Up to now, they are currently happening due to the irregular heavy rainfall, and then the country is also not really well adapted for such weather events. But then also we have had issues of landslides of people from Bududa. We have a drought happening in the region of Karamoja, and families are starving. So the climate is actually really impacting a lot of families in Africa. People are migrating.
People are moving into the area, or people are leaving Uganda?
No, of course, like people really can't afford to live, but trying to move into other areas, because we also had another issue of the landslides in Chiteze, and people were moving out of that area because you can't stay there. They have to be relocated to other areas.
People were buried in the garbage meanwhile during those floods. So it was sad. Like you would find a child telling a story that the mom, the dad, all the siblings are nowhere to be seen. They are really buried, and it even took long to get those bodies, and and someone is just left homeless without a family. It's really sad.
And those are things that have not been happening in the past that you're aware of?
They are just increasing with time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any idea for some solutions to these problems that we're talking about? What do you think would be practical solutions for this issue?
Me, first of all, what I would think is a practical climate solution is we need, first of all, the political will, because it starts with our leaders. We, the people, we could say a lot, we could speak up, but nothing would really happen. But if we have political will from our leaders, they're going to implement the solutions that the people are suggesting. They're going to implement the projects that the people have designed in their various areas, because people are doing a lot of work, but without the support from the leadership, without the support from all the people that are governing us, there is nowhere that we can go. That's why we really need political will, and we keep asking this and this, demanding for our leaders to take actions and to fulfill their commitments and promises in solving the climate crisis.
Question of what percentage of the finances you receive in Uganda actually make it to the local level or make it to the people?
I have an idea, but then when it comes to the finances that maybe the government releases to go to its people, I feel like there's a problem. I don't know, maybe from the leaders, like from the national to regional, there's a problem in between, because you find someone has to get money, sure, maybe the government releases, maybe doesn't release to all areas, but somehow it does, but then it's also up like people find it challenging to get to that money.
I don't think there is really the climate finance still available, and how we talked about like what has been discussed, like the loss and damage fund, it is going to be hosted by the World Bank, but I think the best way that would address how the money reaches is having the traceability, clear transparency of how all the bureaucracy of the money would work out, because the money has not yet been received, so we would actually never know how it would be. So I think it needs to be organized in a more structured. I think in general, we, as all of us, as global warming is something that is man-made. It comes from all our actions, so each one of us is actually a little bit responsible in what is happening. So that's why we all need to gather, that's why we all need to work together to address this issue. So everyone should look in what they're doing, like, are you contributing to the emissions? Are you contributing to the pollution? Are you being a solution to the climate crisis? So each one of us has a responsibility towards the change that we want. Either be a voice, speak up, change your lifestyle, change your way of living, don't be part of the pollution, don't be part of the emissions. So generally, yeah, that's it. So I think like everyone has been speaking about who is supposed to fund these issues, because if you're to look in the percentages, generally Africa as a whole, as a country, as a continent, we have contributed less than 4% of the emissions, and that leaves a whole 96% of those percentages of the greenhouse gas emissions. So that makes us think, like, who really should pay for the damage? The emissions comes from all the industrialized countries, all the pollution, most of it comes from that side. So, and again, we are developing countries, so we really don't have what to give. It's us who are in the loss, it's us who are in the debt, and all the loans that have been offered to us, of the issues that we actually didn't cause, of the problems that we didn't cause. So again, it goes back to the global north countries, it goes back to the developed nations. They should pay up for the loss and damage, they should pay up for a just transition, because most of this is caused by them.
Thank you so much. God bless you both.
Thank you.
We love from Uganda.
You introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Kenny Manuel Dube, and then I am from South Sudan.
My first question for you is, how many people in South Sudan are still using firewood for cooking, or do they use gas and or charcoal?
I could say that 98% of people rely basically entirely on firewood for fuel.
98%?
98%, yeah.
Wow. And any idea what the population is roughly in South Sudan?
Roughly in South Sudan is currently 12 million people.
12 million people. Okay. 98%, that's a very high percentage. And what are some of the climate effects you see as a result of climate change?
I would say that what is currently happening is the global climate change, because you see that we experience high temperatures. Now these high temperatures affect most of the areas. We have almost the southern part of South Sudan experience a lot of droughts, and some places have stayed for many months without rainfall, and it affects livelihoods of people there, because they mostly rely on agriculture. You find that half of the population are cattle keepers actually, and then the other half they are farmers.
Half the people are keeping cattle and half are farmers.
Yeah.
And how high are the temperatures reaching?
In March this year actually, temperatures went beyond 46, 47, 48, and most of the other time schools were closed, and people who were working outdoors were advised to close down completely because temperatures are so high.
Schools were shut down for how long of a period of time?
Schools were shut down for 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, but then the difficult part is that they could be in class, and then there is no reliable electricity that is a little bit cheaper for the population to afford. So to afford electricity is very difficult for them to run air conditioning for students to keep learning in the classroom. It's absolutely terrible.
You also told me there was flooding happening. Can you talk about how many states there are and how many were flooded?
All right, South Sudan, out of 72 states,
72.
Yes, 43 all affected, and currently, before I came, there was a report that more than 1.5 million people are displaced.
Wow.
However, we just had another report this morning that people affected are now more than 3 million. So you can imagine that's like close to a quarter of the population affected by flooding. They're displaced. So many people are displaced completely from their land, ancestral lands. A permanent displacement, which is very tragic.
So the floods are not receding; they're staying.
They're not receding. They're staying in place, and then most of the areas are flat. There's no hilly, there's no high ground, and people are struggling to get the little high ground that is there. You find that there are millions of people trying to find a place to live in, and you can imagine the millions of animals also displaced due to the flooding. One of the areas that were hit badly by flooding, people sought refuge in one higher ground, and it was sad that animals also came up because they're also looking for a place that they can take refuge. There was an incident that animals came up, a young boy was eaten up
wild animals.
by wild animals, because wild animals are also finding higher grounds that they will be able to live. So it's really very terrible, and that's not the only incident. There are so many incidents that many are going unreported. Because of accessibility, there's no road connection to those places. There's no connection to health services and even education. It's very difficult, very tough. I would just say that is a matter of life and death, honestly. You can imagine out of that flooding, people don't cultivate. Where will people get food? And also, there is no access to road networks. Even about road networks, there's no access to communication as well. Because of the overwhelming population, it's always difficult. You find that a very little percentage of people are always reached, and the rest not.
Who do you feel is responsible for this climate change issue, and what do you think will happen to those funds?
By the way, I have a different perspective on climate finance, only because of where I have been, where I work. I work directly with the local communities. It is always very difficult because the local communities are the people who are always faced with these challenges. Most of the people who are helping to respond to this are the local young people and the local communities themselves. And then when we talk about climate finance, you find out that yes, this is the conference of parties. Yes, definitely parties have to agree. And if they're part of the climate finance, I'll say that it has to go to those who are really in the forefront, because there is very little you can see out of climate finance reaching to those in the grassroots. Why? Because of the bureaucracy from where these funds are coming to the governments, and then from the government to the local communities. And also the time frame where these funds are coming from. So it takes a lot of time for this funding to be availed to the local communities. I would say that
It's too late, really,
yes,
right?
yeah. This is difficult. You find elderly people, you find children who are unable to make their way out of the water. It's actually very difficult. It's just a matter of life and death at this moment. And these are all caused by the changing climate, because I have interacted with many elderly people in those places that in those flood affected places. And I was asking them how long have they lived in those areas. Some of them have lived there for 40 years and nothing like that ever happened. And some I've asked them if their parents and their grandparents have ever experienced that kind of flooding. They said no. So if there's some, if local communities and maybe faith-based communities or maybe local organizations can be given the opportunity to tap into that climate financing with us, because these are the people that are living with the community. They are there when crises happen, when disasters happen. They are there with the community. They know what is affecting the community. They know what best can be done, and they have the best solution for their community. And actually, we can see that from the communities that are visited. We find that young people are working very hard to make sure that they create waterways so that water will not take over the whole community.
What do you think could be helpful for the people in South Sudan as far as future climate change actions? And
I think at the moment what is really very, very important is for resources for people to adapt to these changes. We can't say that these changes will come to an end in 1 year or in 5 years or in 10 years. We can't tell that. But what I can say is that if most of the land that flooded now have never experienced that, it means that they are yet to experience more than what they're experiencing at the moment. So it's really going to be very bad. So it's necessary that funds are available to these local communities on the ground. Those initiatives, those local initiatives, local NGOs that are working with the people needs to get the funding necessary for them to help the communities. Yeah, the communities really need support at this moment. They need well-wishers to step in. They need people who have compassion. Just look at how difficult people are really currently coping up with. It's very difficult, yeah. The other point that I also speak about is the efforts by the government, which is okay. We have seen a lot that the government is doing, but that's not enough, because we have had a lot of money being given out, whether from the government budget itself or whether from the development partners. But there is very little we see being used with those funds.
Which percentage would you say actually reaches the people in a practical way?
In a practical way, I would say that out of the funds that are coming, wherever they're coming from, to the government and then to the local people, I would say that's less than 10%. It's less than 10% funds are reaching to these people, because we can see that from how difficult it is for them to adapt, and the lack of enough funds for those local initiatives on ground to respond to these changes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Yes, in addition, I would just say that as a person of faith, as a Christian, I know that there's so many Christians outside there. I would say that let us work together as a team. Let us work together as children of God. And if you've seen your brother and sister going through a lot in the global south, for example in South Sudan, as a Christian you will have that heart of compassion to step in and to help those in need. Sometimes it doesn't need something big, people just need shelter, they just need a tent to put their heads on. Sometimes it's just like a meal only. Sometimes it's just medicine, just very basic things, and that will really help a lot. It will help someone who might die, someone who might not be able to get out of the flooded area. It will really help a lot. So that would be my appeal to fellow Christians like me.
So that's an appeal to Christian organizations, to NGOs, to governments. South Sudan needs your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
My name is Charity Oseyam Ponsa. I come from Ghana. I work with the International Water Management Institute. I'm based in the Ghana office.
Would you say that most people are using firewood and charcoal there in Ghana, or are they shifting to gas?
It really depends on the location. More in the cities, urban cities, we have a lot of people shifting to gas. But within the rural areas, most people still continue to use firewood. But there is a lot of promotion within the country to help people to use more LPGs, like distribution of the cylinders, where you can have the cylinder at your doorstep, and then you can, it's like a recirculation. When it's done, they can pick it up and also fill it at a fee.
Do you have any idea what percentage of people are using cooking gas compared to firewood?
I do not have the exact percentage, but I could say on average maybe over 50% are using gas. In the schools, also for restaurants, a lot of people are shifting from charcoal to gas.
How much deforestation have you seen in Ghana?
I think I've seen a lot. Well, there are a lot of measures being put in place to ensure that we stop deforestation, but it's still there in a way, especially in the rural areas again, because in the cities most of the forest is not there any longer, but also in the rural areas there is some kind of deforestation going on because people need some land for farming. But again, even with farming, we're also introducing agroforestry, so we are encouraging a lot of people to put up trees, so a more integrated cropping system that will capture a lot of beneficial trees like fruit trees and also nuts. Such interventions in place so that even with the deforestation, we are now promoting measures to ensure that we bring back some of the beneficial trees.
What kind of climate change effects are you seeing? You say you're working with water, you must be working in watershed areas also.
I think for us in Ghana, there are three main ones. The first one is the dry spells. So we have a lot of drought in the northern part of the country, especially, and also the western belts. So this is an area which is already semi-arid, and so there are a lot of water scarcity issues. And not long ago, like a month or two, we really experienced a lot of dry spells. The rains were predicted to come because it was the starting of the cropping season, and that did not happen. So midway through the growing up of the crops, everything just got dried up. And then the second one is flooding. So some parts also are lowland, and they experience a lot of flooding. We also have the release of water from neighboring countries because they have bigger dams, and sometimes from upstream, downstream, we experience a lot of flooding. Also within the country, we have rivers and we have lakes. Sometimes there's overflow and then there's flooding in most of the communities. The other one is the sea level rise. So because we are also coastal, we have coastal regions, they also experience the rising of the sea, and that is also another challenge. So these are the three main, I would say, challenges of climate change. For those areas that experience the dry spells, they also have a lot of socio-economic challenges. So it's the area where there is a lot of poverty, or the poverty rate is higher, and coupled with the climate impact, then it's a double problem. That is where also most of the food is supposed to be coming from. It's like the food basket of the country, and so if there's no water and they are experiencing also climate effects, then food security is also at risk.
But flooding also, is that displacing people from their homes?
Yes, we experienced a lot of flooding, I think about 3 months or so ago. We had a dam, it got flooded, and communities had to be relocated, displaced the whole, so we have that.
Did it actually break the dam?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But what we've not been able to do is to have a kind of reservoir somewhere, so that when the spillage happens, also from the neighboring country, they also have a dam, then they open it sometimes. We need to have a central place, like a big reservoir, where we can collect the spillover water. So during the dry period, we can also open that one maybe for irrigation, so that we can have like people growing their crops, or at least for women to grow vegetables along the spillage lines, but that has not happened yet. So most time it's just water being wasted and also destroying crops and homes. And then in some few months after that, the dry season will also come and then we don't have the water.
Who do you feel like is financially responsible then? And how do you see those finances being used?
In terms of who is financially responsible, I would think it's more about the municipal authority, but also the national authority. But again, I am not sure they have enough funds to be able to invest in such capital-intensive interventions. So else the responsibility is for each municipality to ensure that they address the challenges in the municipality. So they can only do what they have resource for, and most times it's just going in straight to support livelihoods and also food security issues, but not too much for capital intensive interventions. If there are funds, I'm sure with a proper articulated step-by-step intervention or agenda, they should be able to use those funds to address such challenges. As far as I know, that has not happened yet. We're looking forward to the global goals on adaptation to see what the final test will be, and also the CCOP, whether finally they agree to something that is meaningful that can address some of these issues.
If Ghana were to receive those funds in a large capacity, do you feel like those funds will actually reach the people at the local level?
I think it's both ways. So it at least it reaches the country. Some of it goes through the bureaucratic politics thing, and then some of it gets also to the ground. What we cannot really follow up or evaluate, we could evaluate, is how much of it really gets to where it's supposed to get to. It gets there, but will it really address all the issues that is on the ground? So in other words, will every penny of that money get to the ground and do exactly what it has to do? Or some of it stays in the political settings and then some of it comes to the ground but end up not doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sydney Simelane from the Kingdom of Eswatini in Southern Africa. I came to join COP29 here just to make sure that we learn as much as possible from the impact of climate change in terms of what we could experience as the Minister of Agriculture with its mandate of providing food security for the country. The reason we are here is that normally if you're talking about issues of climate change, then agriculture becomes the first casualty.
Is this your first COP?
No, my first COP was last year in Dubai, and this is my second.
Are people typically using firewood and charcoal for cooking, or do they use gas nowadays?
We do have an energy crisis in the region. We have what we call the SADC region, which is the Southern African Development Community. Most people use coal or rather firewood for fuel, and then those who are in peri-urban areas, just outside the urban areas, they use a fuel called paraffin. There's a lot of deforestation that is going on. It's just unbelievable. You do see people changing. There's a huge drive in the country that if you kill a tree, you must plant another one. We have a number of non-governmental organizations that are encouraging people, especially in the rural areas, to be involved in the planting of trees. It is very likely to work as long as if you provide the people with the information and the knowledge and the way how we should be replacing these trees that we are using as firewood.
Are you seeing some challenges with climate change in your country, and could you give a couple examples maybe of those?
climate change, if there's anybody who can say he has not observed or noticed the impact of climate change, that would definitely be a lie as far as I'm concerned. I'll tell you this, we're observing certain trends that are happening. The average atmospheric temperature is changing. In my country, we used to have, when we were still in primary school, we used to have about 3 or 4 agroecological zones, and we used to define the temperatures that this one ranges from this temperature to this temperature. One of the interesting ones has been the Lowveld, which is a bit high in temperatures, and then that one was very problematic with mosquitoes. So people were suffering from malaria, and it was a big problem. But what has happened over the years is that areas that we used to call Highveld, where we used to understand the temperatures were normally low, the problem has actually moved to those areas as well. So this to me simply suggests that the temperature in the Highveld has changed to the extent that the mosquitoes that could not survive earlier on have now adapted to this environment, and the temperature has changed to a point whereby they can now survive. But in terms of agriculture, which I mainly deal with, the biggest challenge has been the weather conditions. Very unpredictable and very disastrous. We're talking about hailstorms, we're talking about flooding, we're talking about sudden heat waves, we're talking about drought. It's a big challenge. So what we have been trying to do now is that we try and understand the patterns, the weather patterns, because they've definitely changed from what they used to be. One of the observations we've made is that if we plant and grow, if we plow and grow our crops early in our summer season, for instance, just after the first rains, what happens is that those crops will survive. If you understand the situation in Southern Africa, the staple crop is maize. So people without maize in Southern Africa, that is a recipe for disaster. So what we are encouraging them is that we want them to plow and plant their crops within the first rains, and then we have done some form of provision for farming inputs such as the seeds, fertilizer, and insecticides, just to make sure that they get something at the end of the day. If you delay, you will find that around February we get heat waves that will destroy almost everything. If that is not the case, we get serious storms that will deliver huge stones of hail, and again they will destroy almost everything. Those are the changes that we have noticed, which we cannot explain. We can only say these are caused by climate change.
Did you happen to see any real extreme heat waves this year that were maybe higher than other years on record?
Yes, we have. As time goes on, it is very likely that these heat waves will be even stronger. There is a prediction for weather patterns for the Southern Africa region, which is very scary. It tells us that there will be these natural disasters will be more frequent. These natural disasters will be at a larger scale. These natural disasters will occur at a higher frequency. Now, clearly, if we have a situation like that, I don't think survival would be really possible. We need to plan and do something about that. These are challenges that will need decisions from everybody in the world. All member states, for instance, of the United Nations need to come together and make a decision as to how we can escape this crisis. Climate change is a global problem. It is a problem that affects everybody. It is a problem that we found ourselves in. If we think that we will all sit down and wait and somebody will solve it for us, then we are truly playing a dangerous game. It will not happen. Now, we know the causes of climate change. We know why we are in this situation. It is because some countries have managed to generate energy and other forms of economic activity that will end up polluting the environment. So now we have a choice. We can decide that developing countries will continue in the same trend and get to a worse situation. Or we can simply say those countries that are developed and have reached a stage whereby they can assist the developing countries to stop these emissions, then they will provide them with the resources that they need. I'll give you a very simple example. In my country in particular, we have a need for energy supply. We need electricity. So if you're going to tell me that I'm going to look at renewable energy to provide electricity that will be stable throughout the seasons, throughout, or maybe on a daily basis, we're still very far from that. And I don't think it is a reality anywhere else in the world. What countries have done in the past, they've been able to generate a lot of electricity using fossil fuels. But what they're doing now, they're actually cutting down the usage of fossil fuels. We haven't started as a region, but what we want to do now is to make sure that we are able to cater for the basic energy supply or electricity supply, which is what we would call a base load. So in order for us to be able to do that, the best solution is to go and build ourselves a coal or thermal power station and continue polluting the environment even more. We are very much aware of that, but we don't want to do that. At the same time, we don't want to sit down and starve until we die. Nobody can wait for that. So we want this to be well discussed and well coordinated to be able to say, if developed countries want to assist us into using cleaner forms of energy, this is how we are going to give you resources to do that. And at the same time, there has to be a follow-up of some sort to make sure that those resources provided are directly used for what they were intended for. We need to be very careful about that. It is a big concern for the developed countries that resources may not be used for what they intended for.
Which percentage of funds would you say might get consumed by bureaucracy or corruption or things before they actually reach the people of your country?
It's happening now. I'm not so sure of the percentages, but what I can tell you is this. We can work with the developed countries to make sure that there is enough monitoring and auditing procedures so that none of these funds go to corruption. That we can definitely do. I'm certain about that. We need to set up systems in place to make sure that as soon as these resources arrive, they can be accounted for and they can actually be used for exactly what they've been intended for. I don't know how much money that comes into my region, for instance, is consumed in corruption. I have no idea about that, but I wouldn't say there's none. I understand the region from which I come from. We have other challenges as well. So yes, I feel that can be taken care of and everybody can end up with a win-win situation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, may God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
very
time.
much. Okay.
Yeah, that was really great.
You're welcome.
The nation of Ethiopia is planting trees at a very high level with the goal of covering the country with forest by 30% in 2030. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Ethiopian efforts in tree planting?
Yeah, tree planting is one of the components of Green Legacy of Ethiopia, and our Prime Minister is very committed to plant trees because we have an agrarian country. So if you plant trees, we can manage our forests so that flow of rain will be increasing throughout our country, so that that will help us to increase our production and productivity of our crops. If you look at for the last 6 years, we have planted 40.1 billion trees.
Wow.
And within one day we planted 650 million trees. I think this is the record of the world. If you look, these are the communities how planting trees in their village.
Yeah, so
and
many
also
people.
children's also planting trees.
So how's the climate in Ethiopia now? Is it doing well? Do you get the rainfall or are you having problems?
Yeah, so far 1 year we had problems. There is shortage of rain in different parts of regions, for instance in nomadic regions.
Okay.
So that due to that one we lost a lot of cattle there. So we learn from that and we are trying to make our environments better, not to happen such kind of things again.
Is it improving as you plant more trees?
This year the rainfall was very regular and we expected more quintal of crops.
Yeah. That's fantastic news.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.